there are a lot of things about the SEC that I don't like. A lot of things. And I guess maybe not the SEC as much as maybe some of the fans or the media that covers the SEC, but there are a lot of things that you just don't really enjoy if you live outside that conference's footprint. But there's one thing that they get right consistently, and I think they deserve a little credit for it, is they don't load up the every elite rivalry in the conference in 1 week like the Big Ten does. And I think the Big Ten gets that wrong. And I don't know, and maybe there's no interest in some of the other schools and changing that. Maybe everybody wants to play their biggest rival the last week of the season. And I'm sure that there's some reason for that. I'm sure that it helps drive ticket sales at the end of the season. If the weather's going to be crappy and Wisconsin is supposed to play Illinois on the final week of the season, you going to go? Maybe not. Probably not. Wisconsin's playing Minnesota. Iowa's playing Nebraska. Purdue's playing Indiana. It's a different thought. It's a different idea. It's a different, I have to be there. Ohio State's playing Michigan. Penn State's playing Michigan State. Next year, is Oregon playing Washington, USC playing UCLA. But the SEC does a really good job of sprinkling their rivalries throughout the college football calendar. Now, this week for the SEC is still considered rivalry week. It's just filled with Alabama, Auburn, and then, your SEC/ACC crossovers with Georgia, Georgia Tech, Clemson, South Carolina, Florida, Florida State, etc. You get your LSU, A&M. I don't know if that's officially a rivalry yet or not. I don't know. But the SEC does a really good job of getting Alabama. And believe me, one of my biggest gripes with the SEC is the constant idea of, oh my gosh, it's rivalry week, baby. It's South Carolina and Vanderbilt. Oh my God, it's Tennessee and Kentucky. Okay. And maybe that's a byproduct of growing up in a Big Ten environment is like, I haven't discussed this much on the pod. I grew up and am an Ohio State fan. There's really not a whole lot of time, energy, thought that goes into hating anybody other than Michigan. And for Michigan, like they hate Ohio State and Michigan State. But Alabama has supposedly rivalries with Auburn, LSU, Tennessee. It just, yeah, you don't like people. Okay. But is Ohio State, Wisconsin a rivalry? Not especially. Is it fun and enjoyable to beat them? Sure. But I don't know how 6 times a year Notre Dame or USC fans can be like, oh, it's a rivalry, baby. Okay. I don't have that. I don't have that much hate in my heart that I could hate anybody other than Michigan, Michigan State at times, Penn State at times. But the idea that, it's the third rivalry this month. Okay. And so Alabama fans that I've met some Alabama fans and graduates, and you kind of balk at the idea of is Alabama, Tennessee a rivalry? And they're like, yes, it's a rivalry. Holy cow. Why would you think anything different? Well, I thought Auburn was your rival. Well, they are. Okay. So you have 2? No, we have 3. LSU. And you're like, well, wait a second. What the hell are you talking about? So to their credit, I guess one to their detriment, every game is a rivalry. Holy cow, it doesn't get bigger than this. It's Missouri and Mississippi State. Okay, calm down. But there are, like every other conference in America, there are legitimate primary rivals. Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Auburn, LSU, Florida, Georgia, etc. But they're not all this weekend. They all don't happen on the final Saturday of the season. And I think that one, it does a really good job for keeping the focus on your conference when this Saturday you've got LSU, Alabama. And then the next week, you've got Florida, Georgia. And I realize this isn't in like chronological order. But when you have big, legitimate rivalries throughout your conference, and you can sprinkle them throughout the college football slate, because believe me, when you look at the schedule some weeks, it is filled with dog babies. It is that there are not good games. And I'm surprised that there isn't a bigger push from ESPN, ABC, Fox, NBC, CBS to say to some of these conferences, like, hey, what do you think about letting us make your schedule? Because there, and I think it's not like the Big Ten now has CBS, Fox, NBC, and the Big Ten Network to try to placate and make everybody happy. And you look through some of the schedules, even for next year, there are weeks where it's like, what's the big game for NBC on that Saturday night? There's not a great option here or there. So I'm surprised that there isn't more of that, because when you've sold your soul to the TV devil, you are saying like, hey, this is how it's going to have to work, and it's going to have to be this important. And the SEC does a really great job of is going to put ESPN and ABC in the forefront, because they don't load up all of their and believe me, I'm not trying to say that like Indiana, Purdue, or Illinois Northwestern would be the NBC Saturday night, Big Ten Saturday night game if it was any other week than this one, right? Because like the idea is that some of those primetime windows are going to be reserved for Ohio State, Michigan, Michigan State, Penn State, Wisconsin, Nebraska, Iowa. And if you can get as many of those games interconnected between those 7 schools, Maryland Rutgers isn't going to be, I don't ever think a rivalry, but isn't going to be a game that's going to draw a ton of eyeballs. But in the off chance that Wisconsin and Minnesota were both really good one year, and they happened to play in mid-October rather than the last week of the season at the same week as Iowa, Nebraska, Ohio State, Michigan. And that's sort of the thing, is like everybody in professional sports has realized that like the NFL is king. So I'm not going to go up against the NFL on Monday, Thursday, Sunday. So it's why NASCAR runs their races at 1:00 in the afternoon, because like we can't compete against the NFL in primetime. It's why the World Series, while the World Series puts games on Friday nights, which is traditionally the worst TV audience throughout the week, in primetime Fridays, because the other option is go up against Sunday Night Football. Oh, the biggest show in television. And so I'm surprised that there aren't schools that are like, well, wait, if Purdue and Indiana think they've got a really great rivalry, or Wisconsin, Minnesota, or Michigan State, Penn State, Northwestern, Illinois, whoever you want to pair up in the Big Ten, you're going to play second fiddle every season to Ohio State, Michigan. Every single season. It's going to be the biggest game of the year. And so if you, USC, UCLA, Oregon, Washington, if you think you've got a big time rivalry, you're not going to get the credit it's due if you slap it on the last Saturday of the season at the same time that Auburn is playing Alabama. That, you know, Texas A&M is playing LSU, or in the future, A&M is playing Texas, Mississippi State, Mississippi. You're just not going to get the same headlines, the same TV placement that you would if some of those games were held earlier in the season. Now, as I said, I understand that, one, it's tradition. I'm not a big tradition guy. I've said this before. Tradition is peer pressure from dead people. At the same time, do I want Ohio State to play Michigan any other Saturday than the last Saturday in November? No, not especially. So I would be pissed if I was listening to some fat kid sitting in his spare bedroom telling me that Minnesota and Wisconsin should play the last Saturday in October instead of last Saturday in November. I get it. But I also would be like, you know, it'd be really cool is if that game was on NBC rather than like the 4:00 game on Big Ten Network that 9% of the country gets to see. If my options are play the school that I really hate and despise in front of a lot of people, or play the school that I really hate in front of not a lot of people, it's pretty easy decision, I think. So I realize it's a somewhat radical view of to just say like, but I also think it's reality of the Big Ten to go like, hey, listen, guys, we can make a little bit more money. We can get a little bit more notoriety because there are, and I don't, is Florida, Georgia that big of a rivalry, or is there really just nothing going on at that point in the college football season? Is Tennessee, Alabama really that big of a rivalry? Or is there like really just kind of nothing going on at that point in the college football season? Same for Alabama, LSU. Is there just not a whole lot going on? Probably not. Okay. Well, then like capitalize on it. Get like the idea is the Big Ten exists to govern the 14, soon to be 18 schools in their conference. Not really. Its job is to get as many eyeballs on those teams as possible and make as much money for them. College football is a TV show that happens to like play a game too. It's the reality. I think that sucks because you sold your soul to the TV devil. I hate the fact that you don't know when games are going to be at the earliest until 12 days before they're played. Some instances, 6 days. I think that sucks. I think that's stupid. I think the NFL would put its hand in the meat grinder before it would let TV tell it what time it's going to play. But that's and I think the Big Ten, when it negotiated this new contracts with CBS, NBC, Fox, said, "Hey, we're going to set the schedule or give it to the schools. If Ohio State wants to play at 7:30 every Saturday, then by God, that's their prerogative." Now their options are either to play on FS1, Big Ten Network, or NBC. But if Michigan says we want to play every Saturday at noon, well then CBS, NBC, Fox, Big Ten Network, it's your opportunity to figure that out. But for it to be the other way around, I'm going to tell you when you play, I think sucks. I hate it as a college football fan and as a media guy. I think it's stupid. I hate it. But when you've sold your soul to the TV devil, you can't then like balk at the idea that TV is going to be like, well, hold on a second. We can get a lot more out of Indiana, Purdue, the second Saturday in October than we can the last Saturday in November. We can get a lot more out of Minnesota, Wisconsin. We can get more out of. I think Nebraska, Iowa works if they want to play that on Black Friday every year. Hell yeah, do it, keep it, perfect, works great. But for everything else, one, you're playing second fiddle to Ohio State, Michigan, and I wouldn't want if I'm a fan of any other Big Ten school, and I don't think there are. I don't think Florida State, Florida feels like they're playing second fiddle to Alabama, Auburn on Saturday. I don't think Georgia Tech might, because I don't know how big of a rivalry that is. Sorry, Ramblin' Wreck, you just can't compete. But I don't think everybody in that conference feels as if nobody cares about what the hell's going on this weekend outside of that one game. And in the Big Ten, I think that's what happens is it's all about this one game. And then, oh, by the way, there are 6 others that are happening that those schools consider the biggest. I mean, Michigan State would consider Michigan the biggest game of the year. But for the most part, there are at least 5 other games that this is the biggest game of our season. And they're not even in the same stratosphere. So I wouldn't want that highlighted to me. I wouldn't want to feel like, oh, hey, this is cool. I love playing you already have to compete with Ohio State, Michigan, on the field in recruiting battles, NIL, etc., all that stuff all the time. And then you get to compete with them in the TV wars for eyeballs that you're never going to win because Ohio State, Michigan is this entrenched rivalry that draws the biggest crowds, the biggest viewing audience every year. Why you would go up against that? It's the same reason that nobody goes up against the NFL. Why would you do it? You're going to lose. So why put the biggest games for Illinois, Northwestern, Indiana, Purdue, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, Nebraska, Michigan State, Penn State up against a game that they know they're not going to beat? It's just sort of like running your head into a brick wall over and over again and then being like, man, this really hurts and I'm not making any progress and knocking this thing down. Well, yeah, there's a reason for that. You're not going to win. And I don't know that you could logically tell us. Like if you say to the AD at Minnesota and say, hey, we're going to move your game against Wisconsin up in the air, they'd probably throw a conniption. And that's fine. Like if you want to like continue to be a B or C tier team in your conference, okay, that's great. But the one time that people might be, because like college football is a TV show. And what do we like about TV shows? Storytelling and backstories. You can pretend that you don't care about the soap opera, but Ohio State, Michigan has a hell of a lot more cachet this week because of the soap opera surrounding the game. We know the backstory. We know the drama. We know the days of our lives bullcrap that has gone on between those two programs. And that's what makes it interesting, because for the average fan, who gives a damn that the guys that wear the blue jerseys are playing the guys that wear the white jerseys with the silver helmets? Like at the end of the day, you don't really give a damn about that. You care about the story. You care about the backstory, the story being told. And if your story for Minnesota, Wisconsin, or your story for Indiana, Purdue, and you get the opportunity to tell those stories, you get more eyeballs. But when your story is like, hey, we play the same weekend as Ohio State, Michigan, and you don't really have like the ability to multitask or give a damn about this game too, you're going to be stuck in neutral. So congratulations on that. I've had this discussion before with people like, no, damn it, rivalry. Every rivalry week should be the last game of the season. Blah, blah, blah. Why? If your idea is like, hey, we're going to sell more tickets that week, then fine, I understand. But you're going to sell a lot of tickets to Northwestern Illinois, no matter when it's played, right? You're going to sell a lot of tickets for Iowa, Nebraska, no matter when it's played. But outside of this weekend, the Big Ten has what? Michigan State is like a marquee, hey, we can hang our hat on this weekend that this is going to draw big numbers. It's going to be a super interesting game. Is that it? Like, that is a rivalry that we can point to, where the SEC has your Alabama, Tennessee, Alabama, LSU, Florida, Georgia. Tennessee, Kentucky can pretend like they're a rivalry, but that's fine, whatever. But they have them sprinkled throughout the calendar that you can point to and say, ooh, that's coming up. And the Big Ten doesn't have that. I think that's one thing the SEC does better than the Big Ten. And if I was the Big Ten, or maybe more importantly, I was a Big Ten TV partner, I'd be sitting there going, why the hell do I got Maryland, Delaware on NBC Saturday night when there are all sorts of options that could move the needle a little bit and bring a little bit more national attention to everybody in the conference, rather than just the two big dogs on the Saturday after Thanksgiving? That's just my way of looking at it. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. Looking forward to chatting more college football with you tomorrow, as it is rivalry week. There are plenty of great matchups to talk about. We'll do it tomorrow here on the Daily Huddle from Saturday Glory. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great college football content we're pumping out here on Saturday Glory. If you're listening on the podcast, drop a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping out the channel. We'll see you back here tomorrow on the Daily Huddle.